But what happens, you see, single bullet solutions without providing any time or resources to build intangible assets like confidence to speak, skills to discuss and interact first with one another and then with outsiders, courage to identify openly relations of oppression at home, gender, and in society also gender, and the ability to decide on a strategy to change them at their own pace, at their own time, without and not providing them any support to build their own institutions, which provides them with the space to cultivate these intangible assets. You cannot cultivate these intangible assets if you join the Rotary Club. It won't work. This is what we call empowerment. Now, MYRADA's experience over these last years show clearly that in a stratified society, it is not enough to teach people to fish. We used to tell them, teach them to fish. Because even after teaching them to fish, they cannot reach the blessed river. The obstacles are too many. Traditional oppressive relations, which has kept them as pre-clients, have been strengthened as power and money accumulates in the hands of a few. Who are my biggest opponents in the rural areas? It's the police, who are earning money in the village and lending money there. So the self-help group is a challenge to them. The politicians, as I said, the president and secretaries, what do of the cooperatives? They get the money from the bank at 7% interest. They lend it to the rest of the people in the cooperatives. And the poorer you are, the higher interest you pay. So you're going to run a good cooperative. And they use these societies as stepping stones to political power. Most of our politicians come up from this society. And when the poor reach the river, they find that their rights to fish have already been captured. Therefore, before providing them with tangible assets, you need to provide intangible ones, which are empowering. Yet very few projects with the objective of mitigating poverty invest in intangible assets. Politicians think that these intangible assets do not win votes. You don't win votes on intangible assets. Worse still, if you empower people, they may not succumb to bribery on voting day. You see, and worse still, they may accept a bribe from A and vote for B if they are empowered. So, I mean, it gets a bit complicated. But now, thirdly, why are we really not moving from clients to citizens fast? Is because many of my good friends, including myself, perhaps NGOs, we have our own agendas. And very often it's not so much to move people from clients to citizens, but to keep them as clients, you know. And very often it's very much our security. You know, I returned to India really some years ago with this big objective. I knew everything. I was, some economics, some social. I had all the answers to poverty. I was going to raise 1 million people above the poverty line. I soon learned that the people knew more than I did. And fortunately, I learned, And we've got there. I mean, we've got the million I've got there, but they've got there in a million different solutions, not in my blessed solution. And how do we create a standardized system to accommodate these million? They have a million different strategies, not a million different activities. And each strategy implies 15 or 20 activities, many of which are not based on assets. Many of them are taking loans to repay high-cost loans. I mean, India is doing that. Why not the poor man do that? In fact, my latest computer pulled out after the groups have been there for 7, 8, 9 years. The number of activities tend to get smaller and bigger. And I find these loans to get jobs in government. We computerized all these loans of our 10,000 self-help groups. So what the hell is this loans to get job from government? Then I soon learned that if you want a job in government, you've got to pay a bribe. Where do you get a bribe from? Self-help group. So, we also learned that, it's not just all this, it's also, India is such a diverse country. And it's a country with 31 states, 1,618 languages. You got 2 and you got problems. I know, I was in Syria when I had to do all. We've got 5,400 castes, 6 major religions, 6 ethnic groups, 29 major festivals, so the holidays, you know. And look at this, we cultivate 260 major crops in a year. Now, Europe and US, about 20 or less. And every crop has millions of livelihoods behind it, mind you. So, what do you do with this diversity? Standardize it? Oh, they love to do that. Do you need to preserve, don't you need to preserve it instead of trying to fashion it into a uniform and flat world so that our response can be uniform and easy? I remember, that famous institution, I used to have problems with economists who used to say, Al, can't you make your village is too messy? It's very messy. Try the toilets. No, that won't work. We promote biodiversity. The guy next door is promoting biodiversity with his whole heart in nature, but it has to be nature. But try our best to standardize all the rest in the name of efficiency, for profit, and for convenience. We try to force the poor into our own suits, which we have tailored according to our size and convenience. It's easy. The fourth reason why our projects and our efforts have a limited impact in supporting clients to become citizens is that we development practitioners and policymakers start with several questionable and, I think, invalid assumptions. One, I am just repeating what you said. We start with identifying people's needs, and problems, the problem tree, and it never is a solution tree, it's always a problem. Have you ever gone to people and said, give us a solution tree? No, problem, ZOP or something of that sort. If we start this way, we will continue to build relationships of dependence. You start with problems, you will build relations of dependence, I assure you. Continue to foster client relations, we will continue. We need to start from their strengths. This lays the basis of their citizenship. There's no other way. MYRADA, by accident, identified affinity arising from relations of trust and mutual support, willingness to give time regularly, the willingness to save as the major strengths of the poor in rural India, and we unfortunately built on these strengths. Two, what's the second assumption? We assume that the poor have been doing nothing so far, until we arrived on the scene to give them one or two viable assets which they don't find manageable. Ability and manageability are two different things. Yet, if they have been surviving in a situation of scarce resources all these years, the logical conclusion is they must be pretty good managers. I mean, I got 3 children, I'm a rich man, each one's 100 rupees, I'm a poor man, I have 3 children, 100 rupees, then you would become a manager. And they've done this. This is their strength. And I love this, all our projects are designed on viability, so they got to be big. This famous 20+1, the 20+1 sheep, which I managed to throw out of the window. Now, you give a woman 20+1 sheep, it's a full-time occupation. And you're assuming she's doing nothing all this time. Obviously. So there's something called opportunity cost, we learned some time ago. So what does this poor woman do? She sells 1 sheep in order to survive. There goes your unit cost and your viability. Third, we do not realize that the poor live in a liberalized economy. And that's something we fail to understand. They pay exorbitant interest rates far above the market rates in India. Their wages go up and down depending on demand and supply. 10 years ago, I was in a very high-level meeting in Delhi when we were liberalizing India. And one very senior officer said, Al, you're working with these poor people. How will liberalization affect the poor? I said, you chap, the poor have always lived in a liberalized economy. It's you and I who live in a subsidized economy. We guys might have to pay more for gas, not people.